Okay, thank you. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, and for those of you who know the story, how I came to be doing what I'm doing, 3 years ago I was speaking on a stage about fundraising for small businesses, and a woman came up and asked me why so little funding went to female entrepreneurs. Now, I'm a middle-aged white guy. I didn't even know this was an issue. But then I discovered what I discovered and what I shared with you, and as you've seen, I've become passionate about it. I'm absolutely delighted that our next speaker was in the audience on that day, and she was also in the audience 826 days ago at this very place when we held the first Funding Focus event. Please welcome to the stage Olivia James.
Thank you, David. I have my hands up.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to try and make this desk go higher. Look at this. High tech. So, female founders need to ask for cash and deals and call out BS and get together and share the BS so we can all avoid it together. That was an email from a very well-known founder, and I thought that it summed it up perfectly. As we found, and I love the Emmeline Pankhurst example, we are scared to call out BS. We are scared to call out BS directly because who likes an angry woman? Angry women are a turn-off. So we need to walk this balance. So a bit of background about me. So I'm a therapist primarily. I'm a Harley Street practitioner. I treat anxiety, performance issues. I'm also a guest lecturer at various business schools. I lectured at Cass Business School when it was still Cass. It's now it's a Bayes Business School. And I've also guest lectured at Regents, and I speak about entrepreneurship, mental health, and the dark side of entrepreneurship. And as we've seen, there's quite a lot of that about. So what I'm going to be sharing is my reading of the situation as I've seen it as a therapist, primarily as somebody who understands how humans work and how humans function. So what I'm about to share is based on my client work with founders, with corporate clients, as well as my conversations with founders both on and off the record, as well as my my research and my lectures. So we're going to really look at what's actually happening. And I love the term earlier on about the fact that it's intellectually, I call it bewildering, really, what's going on. I mean, what seems to be the problem here, you know? It's like we've seen the stats from David. Why are we in this situation? So when I work with a client, first thing I do, map the situation, map what's going on, assess the impact on them personally, but also look at the systemic issues that are affecting this client. Then I treat any trauma that's affecting them. Then we together create a strategy to help them take action, because ultimately without action, nothing happens. So we've seen the emotional impact of how an important business like Jane's, I mean, what it means to her to be able to share and to be able to help those people. It's a really, really important thing for her to be able to do that. And to have people refuse her funding, it's utterly unfair, and it's actually quite traumatic. So here we are. So less than 2%. So what's going on here? We've got examples. I'm going to be sharing examples of the WeWork story. I don't know who's familiar with the WeWork story. Show of hands. Anybody? Yeah, you've all seen it. We're going to go into that because we look at cases like that and think, what? My sort of favorite emoji, really, to explain, to sum up the funding situation and many other situations happening right now is that exploding brain emoji. That seems to be the emoji that seems to sum up what's going on. So one thing that happens in when we're faced with overt sexism and overt harassment, and I think, the bias, clearly, it's a sexist thing. There's no question in my mind that it's a sexist thing. So as women, we're conditioned, socially conditioned, to go often into this appeasement situation. So what happens if an investor or a colleague says something really outrageously sexist or demeaning or completely work inappropriate? Often what will happen is we will have a situation where we go, what did he just say? And we'll just sort of almost go into a freeze situation. And in trauma work, we call this appeasement. I'm sure most women in this room will have had this situation where somebody says something to you in the street and you sort of go, oh, and then you go, ah, you might sort of try and laugh it off or sort of make light of it or pretend he hasn't said it. And then later on you might say to a female friend, oh, you won't believe what this guy said to me today, and I wish I should have said something. But in the moment, what happens is we actually have a proper trauma response. And I think we need to understand that this is quite a natural response that happens to us, and that it's not actually a conscious decision by our sort of conscious brain. And I think that is a big part of us, we're told we need to call out like sexism, but often it's quite a scary thing. And if you've seen what happens to people, whistleblowers in organizations, you've seen what happens to women when they call out sexual harassment. It's not good often. And so as humans, what we do is we reread the room. So this really old reptilian part of our brain reads the situation. So what we're doing now in the funding situation as well, we're looking to seeing, okay, so these guys are getting funding, they're not getting funding. So we sort of we clock what behavior happens and what's tolerated. There's a quote from Marianne Sieghart, The Authority Gap, which I highly recommend if who's read this, who's heard of it? 1, 2 hands. I highly recommend you read it. She says, men are assumed to be competent until proven otherwise, whereas a woman is assumed to be incompetent until she proves otherwise. And so the authority gap is, it's called Why Women Are Still Taken Less Seriously Than Men and What We Can Do About It, because that's ultimately what's at the root of this bias. So we've had millennia of misogyny, and in I was one of the beta readers for David's new book, and there's a mind-blowing fact in there that in one canton in Switzerland, women didn't get the vote until 1991. And kudos to Emmeline Pankhurst. What she said there is absolutely really touched me, and it's very, very true. That, women militancy, we shouldn't be angry. And so part of our sort of survival strategy also is to not confront that BS directly, because then we'll make enemies and nobody will like us, and that's going to be bad. And I think often that is a big factor. So what we've got is, we've got the studies, the HSBC study showing that women actually do perform better than men. They perform 63% better than male teams for their investors. So I mean, it truly is mind-blowingly annoying, to put it mildly. Stephanie Nardi Olsen, who's the founder of We Are Rosie, tweeted the other day, and she called it the compounding negative effects of sexism. And so what tends to happen, it's sort of it builds up in our system, basically. It builds up in our nervous system. So if we have a beautiful contribution like Jane, and most of the time female founders have got ideas that actually will really help people. Often it isn't, I'm going to be the next Uber, we're going to be the Uber of this. It's actually usually a very meaningful solution that they have that will actually really help people, and to have somebody then to criticize us and belittle that and to reject it is really, really harmful and hurtful. And if that's happened to you, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're not tough enough or resilient enough. It's actually perfectly valid to feel like that. So many founders I've sort of spoken to and worked with, they find it incredibly disheartening, and they sort of have this rapid cycling of like rage and feeling disheartened and rage and feeling disheartened. One founder I spoke to found that she was really getting very little. She wasn't being taken seriously, and she ended up, her name's Freya, she ended up inventing a male team member called Fred. And Fred had his own email address, and Fred would get his technical questions answered much faster. I mean, this is the kind of like workarounds that people are trying to do here. So in my lectures at the business schools, I talk about like the dark side of entrepreneurship, and the founders are often at the risk of burnout. The mental health statistics for founders, many are at risk of higher risk of anxiety, depression. We've got many founders burn out as well, and many, in fact, will ruin their health and then try and get it back. The first vegan restaurant in London was actually started by, like one of the old ones, was started by somebody who'd exited and then like tried to think, okay, how am I going to rebuild my health? And that's so often, so we've got the burnout. We've also got like the potential betrayal, like being like royally like betrayed by somebody that you trusted. And in fact, betrayal trauma is a really, really quite an insidious thing, and it can take a long time to get over. I've talked to and worked with various founders who have had that happen, and it can cause genuine PTSD, having somebody you trusted like try and take your company or betray you in some way. So then the other thing is, the other B is the BS gurus that you have to watch out for. The BS people that slide into your DMs and say, hey, I'm interested in your services. And then next thing you know, they're saying, oh, actually, we can introduce you to family offices, but you have to pay us whatever. So it's like all these people trying to like benefit from, try and sell you something under the guise of being interested in you. There's a lot of that about in the entrepreneurial world. So at the best of times, entrepreneurship can be a roller coaster. And so when I work with the students, I give them strategies to like stay resilient and also to understand when to ask for help. I found in my work that many founders are super resilient, and many founders have actually had like early trauma in the form of either neglect or abuse or some bad thing happen, which makes them very self-efficacious. So it's like very much like, I have to do it all myself. That's what a founder needs. They need to be incredibly driven and self-efficacious. But the other thing that can then happen is that they're really, really bad at asking for help when they need it, and also recognizing when they need help. So it can be a bit of a double-edged sword. So I think it's like, obviously it's incredibly tough to be a founder, and then adding the funding issues to it sort of makes the pressure like expand exponentially almost. And I think we shouldn't underestimate that. Emma Sinclair, who's a really brilliant founder, she tweeted the other day and said, "It's tiring, isn't it? I'm thinking I'd like to turn all the compliments into cash when I fundraise." And she's given me permission to use that quote. So we read the room, we scan what happens, and then we look at examples like WeWork. And it seems to not really compute. You know, we've got Adam Newman on the cover of Forbes and Fortune, and everyone thinks they're great. And he basically, in my lectures I go into this in more detail, he managed to do a big razzle-dazzle on some big companies. Like he had JP Morgan. He had the two big firms like fighting to do the IPO, and he got them in the end competing by doing iSmarts and crazy stuff like that. One point he had a $47 billion valuation, and his big razzle dazzle was that WeWork, instead of a real estate company, was a tech company. I think in one meeting he got an investor to write him a $10 billion check. It's quite incredible. So, you know, somebody like him with a massive ego is the idea of the visionary founder that Silicon Valley seemed to really like at the time, investors seemed to really like, that like this guy is really driven and he's a little bit crazy, but he's got this brilliant idea, and it's like it's mind-blowing. And he did this, David will like this, I don't know if you've heard this term, he did this community adjusted EBITDA. Have you heard of this? They did like a little magic trick on the how profitable they actually were. Instead of like talking about the mature location, was what the figures actually were. But people were falling over themselves. I mean, that's the thing. So the you know, in the Scooby-Doo, there's always like at the end, there's like, you know, we would have got away with it too. So the Wall Street Journal, in a couple of cases, have been like the you know, the ones that really broke the bubble, the kind of the hype on some of these stories. So The Cult of We is an incredible book. I highly recommend you read it or listen to it, by Elliot Brown and Maureen Farrell. And they really go into the detail of like the funding climate, the kind of the insane excesses of this founder, and what happened in like Silicon Valley to indulge a founder like that. He ended up also leaving with a golden parachute. So utterly unbelievable. At the end of one interview I watched, Elliot Brown was asked, so what is the one question, what is the one answer we can take from this? And he said, how easy it is for minds to bend. And I think that's absolutely true. The idea that you know, most people aren't as rational as they would like to be, as they would like to think they are. So in terms of like action steps and what we can do in solution, I think you need to work out which part of is you and which part is systemic. Now, if you've had a really like upsetting meeting with some investors, sometimes you will be quite upset and traumatized by it. So you may need to like deal with the individual impact of that, but also you need to understand that it's a systemic thing. It's really not you, it's them. So my sense is that in the same way that in corporate companies, people have like there's a whisper network. You know, there's that whisper network of don't get into a lift with that guy. When a new woman joins the firm, she's told, don't get into a lift with that guy. I think in the same way, I know there already are some WhatsApp groups and whisper networks of like just saying which funds to avoid ultimately, because, you know, there is this whole idea of like you have to, you know, every no gets you closer to yes. But sometimes, we've seen the stats, not always. So I think you need to be very strategic about which doors you knock on. And I think being in a room like this will actually really help, because we can all connect with each other. And like ultimately, I mean, if we don't strategize and like act sort of more decisively, we'll be back here next year and nothing will have changed. And nobody wants that. So I'm going to take a few questions. So bear in mind that my area of expertise is humans and how humans work. So questions about the psychology would be great, but also like, what ideas are you finding that work? I'm happy to open this more as a suggestion discussion. So what battles can you win? And so let me take some questions now, and then I will do a little finish at the end.
Any hands? Right over here. Jacob will bring the... I'll just stand on the edge. I'm below the lights so I can see into the audience.
Okay.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Charlotte Wilson. I'm just really keen, you talked about that freeze thing.
Yes.
And I know certainly as a younger woman that used to happen to me a lot. I found since I've got older I care far less, so
Yes.
I find I'm much more vocal. But when I was younger it happened a lot, and I think it held me back a lot when I was younger.
Yeah.
What's your advice for when that happens? Because like you say, at the moment, no matter what it is that it pertains to, at that very moment in time, you literally are sitting there thinking, did they really just say
Yes.
those words? And do those words mean what I think they
Exactly.
say? And you're just
so
stuck in that
there's
spiral.
there's a brilliant coach who came up with a great idea for this, and I need to give her credit. It's to go ask back for questions. Come back with a question. Because when you're put on the spot, all the intention's on you, and you go, God, this is awkward. You just say to him, did you just suggest that if I sleep with you, I'll get this job? Just ask the question, and you can like soften it or make it hard, but it's like in a way to inquire, and you can turn that up, but obviously you risk major retaliation. But if you can ask like a question, some sort of question back, it will get the spotlight on the other person. And also you sort of name it. You name it a little bit. Because often that cringe where you just think, did he just say that? And then you start to, and then you almost start to gaslight yourself thinking, whoa, And that's like often, or the guy will come back and say, oh, it was just a joke, I didn't mean anything, so they sort of try and slide out of it that way. So yeah, but thank you, that's great.
Jacob, any online questions? Oh, we got one here.
Hello, thanks for the session. I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned a book or a paper to read, but I didn't get the title.
There's two books. There's The Authority Gap by Marianne Sieghart, which really talks about the history of why women are taken less seriously than men. If I was a dude here now, a 53-year-old dude with grey hair and a suit, you would take him more seriously than me, right? So there's that. And then there's a book called The Cult of We, about WeWork and about the crazy stuff that went on there. Thank you.
Thanks.
We've got two questions over here. Jacob, is there any from our online?
We do have one, yeah.
Okay, you want to take the online
Yeah.
and then we'll come over here.
We've actually got two. The first one is, how do you get other people to see through the rubbish? It's so frustrating when you can see the reality but no one believes you.
Exactly. And it's utterly crazy making. So I think where it's safe to do so, try and sort of call it out and try and maybe show some stats. Because often, I was talking to someone the other day who said, well, of course it's like 1% because there aren't enough women. But like there aren't as many women. But as David's slide showed, there are. Hit them back with facts and figures. The facts don't tend to, they give her an objective view. Right.
At the back?
Hiya, I'm Tammy Banks.
Hi.
Hiya. Listening to what you said was really inspirational, and I took away lots of tips. But one thing that I've found myself doing as I've gone through my career is actually talking the male language more. So kind of meeting them where they're at, because I felt like I was banging my head on a brick wall. And listening to you, I think that has served me well. It has got me to where I am now. But equally, the last couple of years, I've risen as more of an authentic leader. So I want to lean in to my femininity even more. So what would you suggest with regards to not going up against, because actually arguing with, in my experience, doesn't get you anywhere, but going on that journey without kind of really selling yourself out and speaking their language, so to speak?
So I don't quite understand the question. Do you want to just say it in a sentence?
Yeah, so rather than trying to persuade people all of the time that from a female perspective this would help us achieve what we need, I find that I look for what matters to them and then phrase it in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Would you recommend that?
I think, well, it's strategic. And I think that eventually you can probably turn up like the empathetic feminine side of it. But if it strategically works, then keep doing that, I would say. Because, you know, you need to speak to people in a way that they will hear you and understand you and get on board. So, I mean, the stats are, you know, empathy sounds, for example, sounds like a really girly word. But in fact, you show that empathetic leadership is actually very, very effective, and it stops, on the whole, it tends to stop things like bullying. And like, you look at the stats on bullying in firms, for example, and how much it costs firms and how much it costs in people taking time off work and stuff. I think there's always a business case to be made for doing things in the way that you suggest. So definitely try and, you know, make the business case for it. Arm yourself with stats as well. Thank you.
Okay, we've got time for one more question right down the front here. Sorry. Olivia's going to be here as well, so you can, for those of you who haven't had a chance to ask, she'll be here. You can speak to her on the break. Right down here, Jacob. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Brilliant presentation. Jurga Zielinskaya from Guildhawk, founder. So, question I have actually, in terms of realistically speaking, can you, or do you have any examples where we, as human, changed our behavior? We talked about our instinct and nature and pre-wiring and hardwiring, I suppose, when we grow up and civilization as a whole. So how realistic we are to change the behavior, or we need to change the circumstances around us, i.e. the environment that we're living in. So which one is easier?
I think probably behavior changes in a way that are manageable, in a way that it's not going to come back on you, and there aren't going to be major consequences on you. Because ultimately all of us are based, you know, all of us are motivated by survival. You know, when you're super, like, you know, we've got a higher brain, and we've got the limbic brain, the fight-flight brain, and then we got the reptilian, like, stay-alive brain, right? And often when we get nervous or we get sort of attacked or we feel like unsafe for any reason, you know, we go into that survival mode. So I think a huge part is understanding like how humans work, and like learn how to regulate your own nerves and your own mood, so you can be more strategic. And you can actually stay in the room when you have those conversations, instead of like going into like almost like a shutdown, or you say something and you're kind of almost bracing yourself for like, you know, any kind of missiles that might be coming your way. So yes. So is there a question?
I'm afraid we've got to stop because we've got a very quick one. Yeah, no, it's fine. No, it's fine. We got to go.
Okay. Yeah. So can I just do my little?
Yeah.
So. Thank you, everyone. It's been great. Thanks so much for your questions. So go and network. Go forth and network. This is how we do this. I would highly recommend, if you're not on Twitter, Twitter is brilliant for connecting with founders. So get yourself on Twitter. Please like connect with all each other on LinkedIn as well. Join networks. Find your tribe. Take care of yourselves. And I leave you with one quote. From Cindy Gallop, who we both know. Just remember this: there's a huge amount of money to be made in taking women seriously. Thank you.